Brought to you by Telehelping, a virtual assistant staffing company for professionals.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cody Hall, the host of The Faces, Entrepreneurs Are People Too, and the CEO and founder of Telehelping, a virtual staffing organization, and the here and sponsor of my podcast. So I appreciate you so much, Telehelping, for allowing me the opportunity to speak with wonderful people like Dom. Dom, how are you doing today?
Hey, Cody. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
No, I'm excited. And just for the sake of transparency and authenticity, this is our second take because yes, I did mess up and only did audio the first time, but luckily we only got about 2 minutes in.
Very true. I mean, you can't hate the authenticity. You're owning up to it, and here we are again. That's cool.
Hey, listen, I think you'll get a lot further in life by admitting to yourself what you mess up. And I think we too frequently try to polish our own record in our head. That super ego of ours wants to make us seem perfect, but we're not. Not everyone is as well curated as, say, a Kim Kardashian Instagram post. So not all of us can be Photoshopped, but Dom, that's neither here nor there. I think what's important is telling the subscribers and everyone watching today is who's Dom? Who are we speaking with here today?
All righty. Well, my full name is Dominic Luca. A little bit about my roots. I grew up in Northern California, and a big part of my life that I think is going to be a focus of today is the identity crisis I faced. I was an athlete throughout my life. I played football, first grade, all the way high school through college. And so that was 16 consecutive years. And so my entire life up until the end of college I'm a football player. It was a big part of who I was. It really was something that got me up in the morning, the excitement to go play and to have a group of men that were on the same path as me, putting in blood, sweat, and tears. The interesting thing that I learned as I've gotten older is that comes to an end, and you have to decide what else you want to do with your life. For me, that decision was to become a lawyer. And I do have family that's in the law. So my father is also a lawyer and my older brother is also a lawyer. And so I kind of had that nudge my whole life. But I'm coming on today to really give the insight of, yes, even though I became a lawyer and made that decision, this is going to be the next step that I take into life. I still had those issues with an identity crisis being, okay, well, I used to be an athlete. Now I'm a lawyer. Am I happy with my decision? And so I'm happy to share today the journey that I've gone through already, as well as the new path that I'm forging.
No, Dom, that's great. And, like I said before, and I remember how to get to that therapist that I sat at one day, and she asked me who I was. And I was like, well, I'm a Marine. And I said, am I a Marine? And I wasn't. And it was a huge identity piece. Fun story there. After that conversation, I proved her wrong and I went and joined the reserves. I said, not incorrect anymore. I'm part-time Marine. so, so I'm not wrong. Also, I will join the reserves as a mistake of my life. Definitely. Time tells all things. Was not the best put of my time while in college, but Dom,
is that you did it, you tried it, you didn't like it, rather than curiosity killing you in your head being, what if I did do that?
And I think that is the crazy thing about life, Dom, is once you get enough time under the belt, right, enough road behind you, you get to look back and it says, probably not the best decision. and that's the great thing, because it wasn't. It was it took me places and made me come in and out of semesters when I had to go off and do military things like activations. Wasn't a great time. I was starting companies and they're like, hey, we want you to go overseas, and I'm like, who's going to replace who's going to do my job when I'm not there? Can't, right? And like yourself, I'm sure that it was difficult at times where you were playing ball, right? And what position did you play?
So I was offensive lineman in high school, defensive lineman in college.
All right, yeah. See, switch hitter there. And so, as you played ball for many years, you had to give up other opportunities. Opportunity cost was a constant thing for you. It was like, playing ball, it would be great to go out on a Friday night and hang out with all the people, I'm sure, in college, even in high school. And you're like, can't, because I got a game tomorrow. Like, I'm focused on here. And so you had to give up a lot of things. Like, I'm sure you had to do when you went to law school. That was an opportunity cost.
Yeah, I mean, life's always about the give and take. If you're willing to give your time to something, it's really getting taken away from something else. And the 5 years I've been a lawyer now, I'm starting to learn you really got to be selfish with your time, and you got to find the things that you're willing to give it to and the things you're not. Back then it was easy because it was so regimented. Hey, you have morning workouts now. We're going to go to the gym. Oh, you have practice after. So like it was all selected for you. And it seems that as I'm joining the legal profession, I'm learning if you're not protecting your time and what you're giving it to, it's going to all get taken away from you.
I not only do I have to practice that every day, but I preach it all the time to current clients, to future clients, and then I have to preach to myself to remind myself to do what I also tell other people to do. Because it's easy for us to want to do things, as the example in my head. And earlier I was like, oh, I need to create an automation, which I could definitely jump into our automated system, right? Jump into the sequence, do the automation, very easy. But then, I could be doing something else, right? Like prepping for a podcast, maybe eating some food because I constantly forget to do that, right? But I was like, you know what? I'm going to kick this to my project manager, and because that's what I have her for. And, my clients, lawyers in particular, we big book of business is our lawyers, and they are great at wanting to do everything themselves, right? And when you do everything yourself, you're doing 80-hour weeks, and then you're where's your time for your family? Or if you don't even have a family, where's your hobbies? Like, what is the reason for life outside of what you do? Because life isn't just one side. It's binary.
Yeah, it's a perfect segue. I mean, I started my legal career at small firms. I actually ended up working with my father and my dad, the firm that they started, progressing my way up to a small firm in San Francisco. By luck of the draw, that firm got absorbed by a big law corporation, international law firm, over 1,000 lawyers here in the US, lawyers in the UK. And it really opened me up to the idea that there is a moment in time where you have to make a decision.
Yeah.
An 80-hour week was a good week in big law, whereas that's an insane week to be spending at a small law firm. And so I started seeing the trade-offs that were going on, where I have Father's Days I'm missing, birthdays I'm missing. I can't go see my niece. And I'm doing great at my job. I'm winning cases for multinational institutions. The biggest clients you can think of, they're probably printed on your credit card in your pocket. And all of that, I had to learn the hard way. It wasn't fulfilling to me. For me, family is something that fills my cup up. And so when I realized that my cup was getting drained and I wasn't able to do those things, but I was being this great attorney, I started to look at the trade-off and be like, what's more important to me? Is it my career and being the best I can be at that and giving my all, everything that I have to that, while taking away from my family? It was a tough decision. It took me 5 years to figure it out. And, I'm grateful. Same thing as I was saying before that we both connected on. You have to go try it sometimes and kill that curiosity. Something I love to tell my friends with this new journey that I'm taking is that I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to succeed in killing the curiosity, and just know that it's not going to work. It's not going to be it for me.
One of my favorite sayings is fail fast, right? And I tell the team all the time, I definitely align with the Elon Musk way of blowing up rocket ships, right? And so, like, long as we don't seek the company, let's do it. Let's learn quick. And you don't know if it's the wrong way yet. You don't know if it's the right path yet, because maybe it's a path that hasn't been yet paved. And I quote Napoleon all the time when I say a good, fiercely executed plan today is better than a perfect plan next week, right? And so, because he is identifying the one variable that all of us are forever subject to, and it's time. So, and you said it well. One of my dear friends, now he's a district attorney, or where is he? I don't know what he is. Something federal. He's on the crooked side, the government side. And so he's over, and he started big law, and he was up and working for a firm that support think of a politician on the Democrat side. That was his firm. He was at that firm, and he was, a junior associate working 120 hours a week, and it was his life. And so now that he works as an assistant DA, like, he loves his life, and that's reasonable. Still busy, because one thing that I don't, unless you own your own practice, a small practice, a family practice, you pretty much are subject to the cases. Like, you get a case, that case is a blank check on time, right? Granted, you're going to be billing for it, right? You're trying to get something for it eventually.
Oh yeah.
However, right, you are saying that you're going to commit the time, you want to get paid for it, but you're kind of writing a blank check for that. And that could come at the cost of family, right? It could come at the cost of kids, Father's Days, and things like that.
Definitely. And so it's for some people that trade-off works. And for them, they're willing to do that in order to provide for their family. And, I applaud those people. It's
Mhm.
incredible the amount of work that these big law attorneys do. Being a junior associate like I was able to see the road ahead of me and see all of the partners who had dedicated their lives to the profession. And they'd build great lives. And maybe it just might be the outsider looking in, but there were things that I think that they probably missed out on that they wish they would have gone back and done it differently. Now, only a few attorneys are willing to admit that and say, I wish I might have done something different. I wish I might have started my own firm earlier. But a lot of them, they live great lives. And from the outside, just the perception, it looks like they did everything right. And once you're in it and you're talking with these people, going out to dinner with them, learning a little bit more about who they actually are outside of the office, it's really interesting how traditional and unchanged the legal profession has been. And so I think there's huge room for innovation. And that's one of the things that I'm really focused on now. I left my big law job late last year
Mhm.
because I thought that there's something more, not just for me, but I think that there's also more for the consumer. As you're talking about those billable hours, boy, there's nothing a big law firm is focused on more than the billable hour. Doesn't matter how you get there, but as many hours as you can get, they want it. That means Saturdays, Sundays, night times. It's incredible. It's a real lifestyle that requires dedication for decades.
Yeah, that's great, and it's a good point because I've oftentimes heard lawyers compare themselves as like selling a piece of themselves to every client, right? Because you're selling yourself in 15-minute increments, right? And I think that is a crazy way to live because if I really wanted to, if I didn't enjoy what I did, I'd stop working every day at around 7:30. I'd be done all day. I would go crazy, right? I wouldn't know what to do with myself. But I could just trade a little bit every morning and then be done. But like, what would be your purpose in life? Like, sure, I can only hang out with my kids so long, and my wife wants me to get out of the way most days, right? Granted, my opinion's gold. However, she doesn't want to hear it all day long. And so, I like that you're taking a new approach to it, an innovative approach. And I'd like to hear what are you changing in law? How are you innovating something that is as old as time itself? I feel like the lawyer invented the clock to bill somebody.
Oh, they did. And it's in those 6 minute increments. So point one is 6 minutes, point two, 12, all the way up to an hour. Boy, I can't even tell you some of the things that I build for. It's just, it's all encompassing.
Yeah.
Reading an email, sending a text, whatever you can think. But I left Big Law in order to start two companies. And the first one is a virtual and remote law firm that is offering no hourly fees, just flat rate. We have a variety of services, whether that's forming a business, figuring out if an S Corp or a C Corp is best for you, getting your EIN, and then also actual litigation consultation, meaning if you're going through a divorce, we can help you out with that. We have experienced attorneys. Like I said, my dad and my father, they both specialize in criminal and family law. So divorces are kind of their bread and butter, especially in Northern California. The Silicon Valley people, you'd be surprised. They're working so much, they're getting a lot of divorces. At least that
Yeah.
was my experience when I was working there.
I've
And then
I've collected some myself, so I get it. I was a California entrepreneur. You have to pick.
true, seriously, and I think the second one is really the more innovative approach that is kind of novel. It's called California Legal Drafts, and we aim to provide attorney drafted templates that give the consumer the ability, one, to reuse them, and two, draft their own agreements. If you want to draft your own independent contractor agreement, your own prenuptial agreement. I mean, there's just so many ways a person, a business, and entrepreneurs can use legal templates. And when I was in Big Law, I was looking online and I was saying, well, I'm sure people do this. I'm sure people offer a low cost alternative to full blown legal representation. And what I found was, sure, maybe some people say that they do, and you dig a little deeper, they're not attorneys here in the United States. They're from Romania and they're running an AI software. And it's just, to me, it feels that there's an area where you can have a lawyer like me in California say, hey, come to me, tell me what kind of agreement you need. Do you need contract review? Do you need something drafted from scratch? And giving a flat fee for those services and telling someone, here is how much it costs. Allow them to evaluate whether that's going to be worth it to them. And I think something that's great about this model of giving attorney drafted templates catered to the consumer is you can still draft the agreement and take it to an attorney. In fact, we recommend that after you draft one of your own agreements, you take it to an attorney for review. And so you're taking down the billable hour that attorney is going to charge you, because they're only doing review. They didn't spend all the time researching, drafting. We're willing to do that for a flat fee. The best example I have of this is I saw a story the other day. Ray Allen was a very big NBA basketball player. Are you familiar?
Yeah. I was about to say, sounds familiar.
Yeah, the guy who hit the three-pointer in Game 6 of the finals, I believe, all-time moment. Anyway, so Ray Allen signed a $70 million contract when he was, I believe it was when he left it must be when he went to the Heat. Anyways, he decided not to hire an agent. What he did for his contract negotiation for that $70 million contract was he took it to Johnny Cochran, a very famous attorney, who charged him $500 an hour to review the contract during the negotiations. It turned out to be such an incredible move for him. He probably paid a couple $1,000s on that $70 million contract that he got negotiated and protected him in the long run. Instead of paying, if he paid 1% on that $70 million contract, $700,000.
Correct.
And that's on the lower end of what those agents take. So it's kind of that same concept where you use the hourly billable rate attorney when you need to, but most people don't need that to start. And so we're trying to fill that gap.
That's great. And I love that mentality. I live in Vegas for that exact reason. When I exited my previous healthcare company, I came here with the mentality of like, I'm not giving 13+%, short-term capital gains or even long-term capital gains to California. And basically it was the equivalent of my house. And I was like, I'm going to lose a house worth of money in this acquisition. And I'm like, absolutely not. I will live in Vegas. So I did the same thing. And that's approaches like that we have to think about the impact that's doing to an industry. Like we're talking about cutting out, like in your example, the agent, right? Agents take a solid percentage, sometimes like 10%, I don't know the agent fee norm, but they're taking 10% plus minus of everything this person's getting, right? And if he's signing a $70 million deal, like that 700,000 could have been the iceberg, like the tip of the iceberg of his contracts and how they go on, because some of these manager agreements have trails. So they have a tail respect that says, yeah, great, even if this expires, I get annuities, right? Don't forget that I made you kind of mentality. And those are very important. Obviously being a man of color, going to someone like Cochran is going to be something that's going to greatly benefit him, because he's going to make sure that he is not a later case study, which we've had. I mean, MC Hammer, Dave Chappelle, right? And later on, we're sitting here saying, wow, that really didn't go well for that guy. Cochran's going to make sure that's not going to be the case.
Exactly. And so I think the focus of California legal drafts is we're not trying to replace those top of the line attorneys or even your attorney down the street. We're just trying to give people the opportunity to have an alternative where you don't have to go pay that $500 hourly fee right off the bat. And you may never need to go have the attorney review it. You can get what you need for an affordable cost and not just get billed to oblivion. That's our goal, is to give people an alternative to getting billed to oblivion.
No, and that's very important. I have in my career found myself sitting across the table from a battalion of lawyers before, represented by maybe a lawyer or two. And, it's a scary thing. The point is that you have to have different pathways, because we're all going to face so many different experiences, right? Maybe you're running or just starting a company, right? And you're like, well, I do need this document. I want to be protected and reduce liability. However, I can't afford an hourly wage. Like, going to say like, California drafts is important because you're going to do it in a cost effective manner without, say, sacrificing, long-term, risk.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard because the way that the market is now, I've done months and months of research, and this whole AI revolution, it feels like people are starting to create these software apps that will use AI to create legal documents for you. Now, I'm a little weary of that just because, and when I was in Big Law, we actually had a full week seminar on this because there was an attorney, I believe he was in Indiana. He used AI to write a brief that he ended up turning into the court. And that's all fine and dandy. AI is good at writing, nice sentences, it gets your point across. The problem was the AI was citing cases that didn't exist. And so this attorney turned in a piece of paper to the judge that was making huge statements for his position, citing a case saying this case supports that. And the judge would go and look and go, this case doesn't exist. What is this? And my favorite line from the opinion, where the judge writes a scathing opinion saying that the attorney always needs to review whatever they turn in. It doesn't matter if he used AI, it's still his work product. And he called what the AI was writing hallucinations of artificial intelligence and the arguments he was making. So there's a fine line there, right? Where you have people who are using AI to create these documents because it's very cheap,
Yeah.
but it's not a lawyer who's looking over it after. So it's a very thin line on trying to tightrope.
Yeah, one of our current clients, and maybe even a long-term strategic partner with us, is an AI focused law that has lawyers review it. And so it's actually exactly what you said. Like, AI is great, and I align with AI in a certain way, right? My healthcare company primarily focused on AI derived analysis of risk profiles for patients that were reviewed by nurses and doctors, right?
Mhm.
Versus like, AI has the answer, and like, we're like, does it have the answer? Let's double check, right? And so very similar that they have that path, and he shares a very similar sentiment as you, the owner, and that, hey, listen, AI is great. It has its tool in the world, but it's great to a point, right? It simplifies a lot of little things that are common, everyday elements, but you can't trade it for the eyes and education experience that is a lawyer.
Exactly. And it's hard. It's hard to tell people that, hey, don't go pay that $5 for those forms that may be fine versus, okay, now you got to pay $150 for an attorney reviewed form. But I think if people just knew about AI in that case I was telling you, because a lot of people don't know, my friends will tell me, hey, I plugged into ChatGPT how to start a California LLC. And I'll read it and I'll go, yeah, well, that's fine. I mean, it's not bad advice. Are you going to trust them to help you fill out the forms that you have to turn into the California Secretary of State? Probably not.
Yeah. That's interesting, and I love the direction, the flat fee and the pre-filled forms, really providing options to people who traditionally are just subject to the billable hours retainer life, right? Which is most of law still currently. And so, well, when you're not over here doing all these entrepreneur things and, having 2 feet in two buckets and going 100 miles per hour there, what do you do outside of work, Dom? What does life have for you when you're not innovating law?
So I'm a type of guy that something that fills my cup up to the brim is being with family, spending that quality time. It can be as simple as sitting in the living room sharing a meal. And my dad lives out here in Vegas. He moved for a very similar reason to you, to avoid California taxes. So me, my brother, and my sister, we all fly out here frequently to see him, hang out, just have a weekend. And we frequently don't even go to the strip. We don't need to. We just need to be together. Other things I love, I got to be in the sun. I got to get some tan.
Plenty of that here.
I know, right? And then, I mean, watching sports, I'm a huge football fanatic. I'll get into some NBA once they stop giving that SGA guy all these quick whistles, I'll maybe be a little more happy. The guy who's front runner for the MVP, but that's for another time. So sports fanatic, son, family, I'm easy.
No, that's great. And, that is a big thing because one thing that I'm very painfully aware of is, where I place my time. That's how I go about, money is great for scorekeeping, right? And I judge all my ventures, telehelping being the tip of my iceberg, right? Trading is something we alluded to, and then there's multiple others. By the money they make is important because they need to make money because that's their scorecard, right? Um, but when I'm not doing that, I was just thinking last night as I was at the tennis courts and playing tennis. I was like, how much do I really want to be playing tennis right now? Would I rather be at home hanging out with my, wife and my son? Like, is that what I want to be doing? Like, okay, well, I don't play tennis more than once or twice a week. Okay, I'll play tennis, right? But those are thought processes that you have to have. I had a client on here, great guy. Him and I have been able to connect and communicate after the podcast, as he's a wonderful experience, former VC owner. And he said the worst thing his dad ever did was buy a boat. He said the day that his dad bought a boat, he got divorced. It took 20 years to get there. But he realized after, all this time that he was spending on the boat and he wasn't with his wife, who wasn't a big fan of water, right? It created this divide, right? And they went on different paths at that point. And so when he wasn't working, right, as a lawyer, right, he was on the boat. And what was interesting about that is it made me start to think about, well, what pathways am I making in life? Like, what divides am I creating that are taking me away from my unit, my family, that could later on, an inch today, it could be 1,000 miles a year from now.
That's an interesting story. I mean, the fact that he bought the boat and then it took years to unravel, but that was the point in time. I think that's very crucial for people to understand. Yeah, you buy a boat, maybe you want to go have fun with it, and that's your goal. You don't realize what it's taken away. I mean, for me, being at the ripe age of 30 years old, not in a place to buy a boat yet. But when I make those decisions of, I'm going to join this league, or I'm going to buy this video game, whatever it may be, there's other things that I could be doing. And it's really hard to always feel like you're making the right decision. But I try to take it day by day and if I'm happy with this decision now, I don't have to worry about if I'm going to be happy in months from now. Trying to be present. I think that's a big part of happiness, really.
Well, I always say good, bad, hard to tell, right? People, you lose your job. Well, bad in the short term because money buys food and shelter, but maybe that leads you to your dream job. Maybe it leads you to starting your own company, right? And so that is always the case in many things. Buying a boat, day one, good day, right? 20 years down the road, bad day, right? When you finally had that moment, like we spoke about earlier, when you looked back and it was like, well, I started off with the best intentions. Like, that is the direction I originally wanted to go. And, I think that is, a great representation of law itself, right? What is law except a representation of decisions that have been made back as long back as the applicability of the topic, right? That determines your stance today. And I think I say this in all my conversations with lawyers, so that the people who do listen to me, in case they are day one, first day on the channel, if that's you, welcome, fun ride. If you've been here every time, you've heard me say this before, is I have so much value in good law because, I know numerous podcasters. I'm the only one who has a podcast agreement, right? Because, it's a thing to me because I'm going to repost this on my business page. I'm going to repost it on my page. I'm going to make shorts and it's going to find its way across my social medias. What if one day I meet someone who's like, I didn't approve for Cody to repost me to telehelping, right? He used my likeness and then I'm getting sued. And because we live in a litigious world, why not just take 5 minutes, right? A couple $100. That draft for my GC, right? No more than $500. It can't be. And if it was, fine, right? but it saves me from a lifetimes of what could be a lot more money.
Cody, it's incredible that you have that foresight. It usually takes people getting burned in litigation by not having an agreement to then and get one. I'm also very happy that hopefully you're right that all these podcasters don't, because at California Legal Drafts, we'll draft that for you for a flat fee. A nice
Boom.
podcast agreement. I mean, even me and you were talking back and forth about the terms of the agreement. And we're just like going through it, making sure that I understood it. And it's like
Yeah.
if people just took that time to be proactive and say, I should have this, just for the future, just in case, to protect myself. I think a lot more people would have agreements in whatever they're doing.
Well, I have a compliance background, and was chief compliance officer at a healthcare company, and my sole job was to think of the bad before someone else thought of the bad and try to get ahead of them, right? And sometimes there's really pretty little laws that say what you can and cannot do, and then there's everyone else, especially at a for-profit company, right? Where they're thinking about how can we make more money, right? And that's a scary thing in healthcare, because a lot of the rules in healthcare, especially if you're doing government programs, is oh, is trying to prevent you from taking advantage of humans for the purpose of profit. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like we had in our conversation beforehand. Your likeness and people's likeness that I'm recording on this podcast, it's yours. Like, you want to take this recording and do whatever you want with it, it's fine, as long as it's not, malice in nature and it's not intended to defame me or libel or anything like that. Great. However, for me, and the reason I went towards the podcast agreement and the mindset I had there was like, I have this conversation that I'm having with Dom for a specific period of time, and Dom's agreed to having that conversation in messages. However, unbeknownst to Dom, maybe I do want to repost this, right? Maybe I want to take a snippet from this because it was a perfect example of why someone should hire a virtual assistant through telehelping to save them time. And Dom didn't agree to that. So Dom's like, whoa, my man, I just wanted to have a conversation, right? And Dom's like, you know what? I have a free Friday. I'm going to draft me a lawsuit. So because some people are that way, I think of those people, which is why I document things.
And it's just really, it's as easy as, let's clarify our relationship. Like, let's just have a piece of paper. Yeah, we had those emails, and there's people who like to lean on text messages when they show up to court and say, oh, we had an agreement, it's in text message. And you could have a contract by writing on a napkin. It's as simple as that. But isn't it just easier to have everybody sign and read through everything? Totally agree. Your compliance background is helping you in more ways than with your businesses and everything you're doing. It's pretty incredible. I wish one of the things that I'm also going to lean into is I want to have an educational role in this space of,
Yeah.
yes, I'm a younger attorney. I know how people like to consume information now. And like you were talking about with those little laws that say what you can and can't do, problem is they're buried in pages and pages of congressional findings. It's not like you can't do this, you can do this. No, it's pages and pages of stuff. And so I think if more people understood kind of the laws and how the legal system works, they would get agreements to formalize relationships, and they'd also
Yeah.
take some time to do some research to be like, is this legal?
It's interesting you say that, because I just had to sit in my, every 5 years I have to do a concealed weapon permit renewal. And a law that I oftentimes forget exists until I go to the class, as they mention, is there's a U.S. law that was made back in like 1987. It basically says that regardless of where you reside, your state, right? If you're traveling somewhere, say, for example, I live in the great state of Nevada, where I can own a fully automatic suppressed rifle, right? And, and it's the gift from God by the state of Nevada that I can do so. Say I wanted to go to a course in Washington, right? And I wanted, for some reason, to drive through California on my way there because I wanted to hit the 5 and go through Oregon, because why not, right? Beautiful drive. Here's the thing. If, otherwise, not for this law, if I were to step into the state of California with said rifle, or Oregon, right, they would put me under the prison's bedrock that the prison was built on, because all that, very illegal. However, this law is like, whoa, 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 whoa. I mean, he's American and he's abiding by laws. let's subject him to the laws of his destination, right? And so by Washington standards, I'm legal. I'm going to Washington, regardless of the route I picked. And so they came up with this really nice law that says you can drive to your destination, be subject by your destination's rules, but you can't go more than 2 miles off the highway, right? And you can't be there more than 2 hours. And so, hilarious enough, there's been cases where someone went 2.3 miles to Wendy's, right? And they got pulled over and they had the wrong guns in their car on their way somewhere. And unfortunately, they are at that point in time no longer protected by that law. And that's the thing, like, you talk to a 2A attorney, right? They're going to know that, right? However, if you just chat GPT it, there's a good chance that chat GPT is not going to have this law from 1987 in its category to choose from.
And the other thing is ChatGPT is not going to know about the pending legislation now, whereas CCW should, they're trying, we'll see how it goes. CCW would apply to all the 50 states,
Yeah.
meaning if you are licensed in one state, that will transfer over to you being in other states. Now, the silencers and the huge mags, I don't know if that'll pass muster.
Probably not.
Be a small way for you to still have that CCW carry throughout.
And I think another way to hit it really home for us is that what people my thought process was like, yeah, baby, internet, not international, but full United States CCW reciprocity would be amazing. Having my CCW recognized by all states would be great. However, to put another layer on top, because what would law be if it wasn't confusing, right? I have an app because I use a company that because again, right, compliance in me, I'm always protected for the most part. I use that you call US Law Shield. It's an insurance that if I were to ever defend myself, whether it's with a fist or a stick or a gun, like I have full civil and criminal protection. Like, I can call up lawyers, they're going to defend me, expert witnesses and everything because I pay for it every month. Mm-hmm. They have a map basically, and their lawyer came to this class, and I've used them for years, but he was talking about like right now they're either red or they're green, and there's one or two that are yellow. He's like, if this law goes through, they're all going to become yellow, and which basically means it's subject to wherever you go, because California may have to recognize it, but say LA County, right, creates their own sub law. And that's the point. I think what everyone should gather from this conversation is you in no possible way, either as a single attorney or as an individual, are going to have all the information you need. But if you're definitely not an attorney, don't chat GPT your documents. I think I've said that 4 or 5 times across different episodes. Don't chat GPT your documents.
Great advice. It's great legal advice from you, but not from me.
No, this is at the end of the day, I only know enough to get in trouble. All right. And I think what you're working on is really great, Dom. And I think that, much like myself and many of my industries and careers, I've always been a young kid in an otherwise very experienced person's game. And, whether that's the BPO space, right? I'm actually a rarity. I'm a white American in the BPO space with call centers in Mexico. So that's a really rare space to be in for me being who I am. But, in the healthcare space, being a young person in law oftentimes can mean just being dismissed. And so I think it's the opposite. New blood is good blood, right? It should be taken with caution and understanding that there's a lot to still learn. But what you're doing is you're like, hey, listen, there's a lot that I don't know, but we're building a database. And then I also know that doing it the same way forever, billing everybody by hours, is not the way we have to do it. So I think that what you're doing with the legal industry is great.
I appreciate that, Cody. Yeah, I mean, never will hold myself out to know everything, but I definitely know who I can talk to go find out what I need to know. And I think if people really implemented that, and they, instead of going to chat GPT or just their family friend that's sitting at the dinner table giving them legal advice, they just took the time to really go evaluate it and say, okay, well, what's my issue? Can I figure it out through publicly accessible means, researching, figuring out the status of the law, the state of the law, and then also checking that after the fact. Maybe take the time to say, hey, attorney, I found out this about this law. Here's how I see it, and here's how I apply it to my situation. What do you think? You're going to cut that cost down that you pay. And I just think really taking the approach that you always want to protect yourself, as you were saying, like I'm always protected. It's a great way to live. It just gives you that peace and security. Love the thing that you have with the attorney providers through the company you have through your CCW. I mean, you're doing it the right way. Your listeners should take a piece of this and be like, what are some ways that I can protect myself? Where am I unprotected right now? And then what are those solutions? For some people, if you got all the money and you want to pay for an attorney on retainer for all the little things in your life, that's great. There's other ways too.
That's the thing. And my last little soapbox statement is that, I trade on the market every day, something I brought up a couple times chatting with you already. I'm generally, I pick a direction. Like, I think we're going to go up. Quote me, everybody. Tuesday, the 18th, March 2025, right? I think we're going to go up. I think the market is ultimately going to head in an upward direction, right? If it crashes tomorrow, this will be short-lived. However, right, I'm protected. Like, I've also invested in down positions because I understand that I could be wrong, right? And I think that's what's very important is if you are someone who invests in the support of legal aid, it's because you understand and you're admitting to yourself that you can't do everything.
Yeah. Instead of paying for an AI software that's legal aid.
Yeah. Well, Dom, one thing I want to make sure that we put in here is I want to know how people can get in contact with you before we run off towards the end of the cast. Chat, how do people contact you for either the legal side or the doc side? Maybe it's one. Talk to us.
Yeah, so I have two separate websites. The first one is lucalaw.org, LUCALAW.org. That's the law firm side where we can give you a free consultation, hear about your issue, see if we can help, or help you find an attorney to help you with your issue. The other one is CaliforniaLegalDrafts.org, spelled the regular way. And that's the one where you can get templates from us. You can also reach out with a query and see, hey, can you help us with this specific issue? And we may refer you over to the law firm side, vice versa. You can also contact me on Instagram. My name is The California Lawyer with underscores under each. I'm happy to contact or talk to anybody. Free consultations. Come let me know what your issue is.
Wonderful. Dom, thank you so much. And as I always say to everybody, if for some reason you cannot find the rewind button, right, and cannot go back and listen to exactly what Dom said on how to contact him, feel free to contact us at info@thefacespodcast.com. We'll always connect you. We've done it before. Some people have reached out to us like, hey, I can't find so-and-so. My team, who's from telehelping, they'll make sure it's taken care of. So, Dom, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a great recording, and I've really enjoyed learning about you and your businesses.
Cody, the pleasure's all mine. Can't thank you enough for having me. Look forward to connecting again in the future.
Always, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.